UFO talk, all the rage right now, and I mean, how could it not be? Anyone who's ever been camping and looked up into the stars has asked that most fundamental question of what's beyond our world. People are more than happy to latch on to whatever bit of crumb or news or theory that gives them hope of humanity finally becoming a part of the greater galactic community. Recently, we have former US military officer David Grush attempting to blow the whistle on what he paints as one of the greatest cover-ups in human history, perhaps the greatest cover-up. He alleges that the US government is in possession of extraterrestrial vehicles and pilots, but that they've done everything possible to keep that secret, up to and including murder. Whether Grush is telling the truth, I mean, that's something you have to decide for yourself, but I thought it'd be an interesting time to take a look at both in fiction and reality, the search for extraterrestrial life and the great question that underpins it. I'd like to start this discussion with a reading from the foreword of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, this is an interesting number, for by a curious coincidence, there are approximately 100 billion stars in our local universe, the Milky Way. So for every man who has ever lived in this universe, he means a galaxy there shines a star. But every one of those stars is a sun, often far more brilliant and glorious than the small nearby star we call sun. And many, perhaps most, of those alien suns have planets circling them. So almost certainly there is enough land in the sky to give every member of the human species back to the first ape man his own private world-sized heaven or hell. How many of those potential heavens and hells are now inhabited, and by what manner of creatures? We have no way of guessing. The very nearest is 1,000,000 times farther away than Mars or Venus, those still remote goals of the next generation. But the barriers of distance are crumbling. One day we shall meet our equals, or our masters among the stars. Men have been slow to face this prospect. Some still hope that it may never become reality. Increasing numbers, however, are asking, why have such meetings not occurred already, since we ourselves are about to venture into space? 2001: A Space Odyssey, both the novel and the associated film, which were created together, are fairly incredible in their ability to predict the future. Reading the novel again, the scene with the newspaper device, it's pretty much a modern tablet connected to the internet. You'd hear about gravitational slingshots and other maneuvers in the book, predicted, then used by humanity later. However, the question posed there by Arthur C. Clarke in the prologue was one that was more of his era. If you're familiar with the search for extraterrestrial life, you've probably heard of the Fermi paradox. The paradox is based on a conversation had in 1950, and the basis of it is the simple question, but where is everybody? The paradox obviously needs a bit more setup than that. The idea is, if there are billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy and hundreds of billions of trillions of stars in the universe, many of these would have planets in a habitable zone. Many of these would have been the right condition to create life. Civilizations older than humanity on Earth should exist. Some should have developed interstellar travel, and even with the slow speed of traveling, some by now should have visited Earth just based on the scale. However, despite all that, except perhaps in the basement of some American facility, we've yet to see real signs of intelligent life. And at least personally, the more we search locally, the more it seems, I would say, very likely that there may be life, or at least had been life, within our solar system. Mars, for example, most likely had water. There is evidence of something consuming methane on Titan, which could be organic. Now, nothing for sure, but the fact that what we've looked at has already shown a chance, just statistically, when you're talking about the size of the Milky Way galaxy or the universe, it almost seems arrogant to think we're the only one. There's even what's known as the Drake equation, which uses a variety of figures, including some that I mentioned, the number of stars, the rate of stars which have planets, the rates of those planets which exist in what we would call a habitable zone, alongside estimations, like what percentage of life will grow to not only develop a civilization, but a civilization advanced enough to create either spaceships or a signal in space that we could detect. The problem is there's so much supposition here that you can really work your way to any answer you want. So, where is everybody? Why is nobody knocking? Well, there are a number of possible solutions to the Fermi paradox. For one, it could be that God exists, he decided to create humans and nothing else. I personally don't believe that, but I mean, sure, that's an option. The other option is that, well, life is extraordinarily rare. You can plug the right numbers into the Drake equation to get 1 or 0. But not only is life rare, but advanced intelligent life is so rare that for practical purposes, it's impossible. If you're interested in that discussion, it's something Dawkins considers but rejects in his book, The Selfish Gene, where he describes Darwin's theory of evolution as basically taking over from where the random smashing together of molecules leaves off. In that book, he also describes how experiments which try to capture the early conditions of a young Earth can see the creation of complex molecules in just a few weeks based on simply the addition of a source of energy. This includes even complex biological materials like amino acids. But going back to the rare Earth hypothesis, it's worth understanding that rare isn't referring to the fact that the planet has water, it's not too close to the sun, not too far away, but in reality there's more than that. The planet has to be stable given that the evolution of life will take millions of years, it can't be too close to massive sources of radiation, there has to be a source of necessary metals, obviously there has to be an atmosphere, and there has to be that biological and evolutionary trigger for life. Now, the rare Earth hypothesis doesn't answer the question of advanced life, but depending on the calculations, there are some that say even the development of reasonably complex life was incredibly unlikely on one planet. And when talking about the ability to create machines to travel the stars, it could be that humans are not only rare in terms of being an advanced life form, but are also particularly well suited for space travel. Before humans developed writing, for example, we had the ability to communicate with each other through our hands and our language. Humans are not the sturdiest creatures. They have a very large brain, alongside long pregnancy periods and less defensive attributes compared to other animals. If it wasn't for the monolith we discovered in Africa, we probably weren't making it past the man-ape form. Now, I'm joking, but it could be, if you follow this hypothesis, that we are one of a few, or perhaps one of a kind. Now, there's no answer to whether this is right or wrong. I can't pull up a Wikipedia page and go, hey, check out that last paragraph there. You know, God edited this page and it turns out, no, this isn't right. I, as a layperson, think there's some compelling rationale behind the rare Earth hypothesis and the rarity of life establishing at all. However, I also believe that the approach may be a little too human-centric, ignoring other ways life could develop. And I also think the more we look at the universe, the more Earth-like planets we see. But again, I'm not an astronomer or a biologist. This is just my feelings, and I wouldn't really argue. I'm just presenting it alongside everything else. And I mean, an associated note of this is the fact that, hey, space is really, really big. Yeah, the galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars, but it's also 100,000 light years wide. And if you want to talk about the rest of space, well, the scale becomes hard to imagine. The closest galaxy to the Milky Way is Andromeda, and that's 2.5 million light years away. The speed of light is a limit on the universe. Information, light, gravity, anything cannot travel faster than the speed of light. If our nearby star, not the sun, Proxima Centauri, disappeared, we wouldn't feel the gravitational effects, we wouldn't see anything for 4 years. If it was Andromeda, 2.5 million years. So that's perhaps an explanation. Yeah, other life is out there, but there's no way around the speed of light. You know, wormholes, they tried it, they didn't work, whatever. We're not going to run into you for a few million years. It's even if we're sending out our strongest radio waves, our fastest probes, whatever. The big detraction from that, however, is that the universe is pretty old, 13 billion years old. Even the Earth itself, 4.5 billion years. You'd think at some point somebody would have broadcasted a strong enough signal which would now be reaching us, especially if civilizations were as likely as some theorize. So what's the explanation there? And there are actually several theories, aside from the ones I've already discussed, of course. It could simply be, hey, we haven't looked long enough, beings are too far away, we've only measured a small part of the sky. And yeah, I think there is some compelling nature to that argument. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson who in an interview said, think about it like this: the ocean's full of life, but our exploratory efforts so far have been putting a thimble in and not finding anything and giving up. If you remember from Contact, which I talked about a few weeks ago, that's sort of one of the big arguments and the answer given by Dr. Arroway. It's also possible that aliens are too strange for us to understand. Their thought could be so fundamentally different from ours that we wouldn't understand what their signal is. And if we start to cross over into science fiction, we can also associate this with ideas like a technological singularity, or even moving beyond the physical nature into some other form of existence. If you read Arthur C. Clarke, this is what you see in a lot of his novels. We don't stay in flesh and blood forever. And let's talk about some other speculative answers which you may have seen in science fiction. One of the most common responses to the Fermi paradox is the Great Filter, which suggests that at some point before civilization is able to explore the galaxy and meet other civilizations, there is a thing which stops them. What that thing is up for debate. It could be possible that it existed in an earlier stage of evolution, which humanity, against all odds, managed to bypass, or that something will stop us as we are about to explore the stars. It could be that any race which is advanced enough to explore ends up destroying itself. I don't believe that, but it's possible. It could also be that there's some greater force which exterminates things. If you look at Mass Effect, the Reapers aren't quite a great filter because they stop things way after the Fermi paradox is answered, but they're a filter in that they stop advanced civilizations at a certain point. I mean, you could also say the same thing of the Halo rings. The rings were fired about 100,000 years before the modern era. Without the evidence left behind of the Forerunners, it would have been impossible without technology like slip space drives, which allow faster than light travel, for humanity and the Covenant races to have even met, to have even detected their radio signals. And I suppose the great filter here could be not something destroying the civilization, but some fundamental change like we referenced earlier. Perhaps upon reaching a level of technological advancement, races tend to lock themselves up in some different form or dimension, or even within a Dyson sphere. The dark forces hypothesis is an associated idea that other species do exist, but the universe is so dangerous that to show themselves would invite certain destruction. Or as we see in Contact, it could be that when civilizations reach a certain level of advancement, they're sort of roped into the galactic community and their futures are sort of put forward by someone else with the idea, hey, leave the kids alone while they're evolving. Or, as I mentioned, it could be that aliens do exist and they're in some government basement somewhere. But that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely very different than what I normally do, but hopefully still fun for you guys to listen to. Until next time, be safe, have a good one. May the Force be with you.